Oh, they thought you were done, didn't they? They really believed the story was over. The book was closed. The curtain had dropped on your little performance. They watched you stumble, watched you bleed, watched you crawl through the sharpest years of your existence, and somewhere in their twisted little minds, they wrote your obituary before you even stopped breathing. But here's the thing that's eating them alive right now, the thing that's keeping them awake at 3 a.m. scrolling through your life trying to decode what the hell just happened. You weren't even trying. You weren't flexing. You weren't proving anything to anyone. That was 0.1% of what lives inside you, and it shattered their entire reality like glass hitting concrete. Can you even imagine what happens when you stop playing small? When you stop dimming your light to make their insecurities comfortable? When you finally decide to show up at full capacity? Let's rewind for a second, because they need to understand what they witnessed, what they're still trying to rationalize, what they're desperately trying to minimize in conversations with people who never even met you. For months, maybe years, you operated on reserve power, on fumes, on the absolute minimum energy required to keep your heart beating and your lungs moving. You were running on emergency mode, the kind of survival setting that kicks in when life has beaten you so badly that just getting out of bed feels like climbing Everest in your sleep. And during that time, during that chapter they thought was your final form, during that season they assumed was your peak and your valley all at once, you still managed to do something they couldn't comprehend. You still loved people who didn't deserve it. You still showed up to rooms that didn't celebrate you. You still created, still dreamed, still smiled through the kind of pain that would have hospitalized their spirit. That wasn't strength. That wasn't courage. That wasn't you trying. That was you existing on 0.1%. And it still outshined everything they were giving at 100%. Now, let's talk about the collapse, the implosion, the complete and total disintegration of their confidence that happened the moment you started healing. The second you began to remember who the hell you actually were before life taught you to shrink. They watched you stand up straighter, and it felt like an earthquake. They saw you speak with certainty, and it sounded like thunder. They noticed you stopped apologizing for taking up space, stopped explaining your choices, stopped seeking permission to exist loudly, and suddenly their whole social hierarchy started cracking. Because here's what they never told you, what they'll never admit even under oath, what keeps them up at night, staring at ceilings they can't afford, because they spent their energy trying to dim your star instead of building their own. You were never the problem. You were the standard. You were the mirror they couldn't look into without seeing every compromise they made, every dream they abandoned, every excuse they worshipped, like it was strategy. Your 0.1% reminded them of the 100% they'll never touch, because they're too busy managing perceptions instead of building substance, too occupied with looking successful instead of becoming capable, too addicted to the comfort of mediocrity dressed in designer labels and borrowed confidence. The moment you stopped performing for their approval, stopped auditioning for roles in productions you never wanted to star in, stopped contorting yourself into shapes that fit their narrow definitions of acceptable, that's when their world started collapsing. Not loudly, not dramatically, but slowly, steadily, like a building with a cracked foundation finally giving in to gravity. They tried to gaslight you into thinking you were changing in a bad way, that your boundaries were aggression, that your standards were arrogance, that your peace was privilege. They threw everything at you. Every manipulation tactic in the handbook, every guilt trip, every silent treatment, every indirect post meant to pull you back into the arena where they could manage you, control you, predict you. But you didn't bite, you didn't engage, you didn't even flinch. And that indifference, that refusal to dance to music you didn't choose, that's what truly broke them, because they realized they no longer had power over your emotions, your decisions, your narrative. And people who built their entire identity on controlling others absolutely cannot survive the moment their puppets cut the strings and walk away. Let's get specific about this 0.1% they witnessed, because they're still trying to convince themselves it was luck, timing, connections, anything except the truth that you are fundamentally operating on a different frequency than they'll ever access. That 0.1% looked like you finally saying no without a paragraph of justification. It looked like you choosing yourself without guilt. It looked like you walking away from tables where you were the topic but never the guest of honor. It looked like you building in silence while they celebrated in noise. It looked like you healing your trauma instead of recycling it into content for sympathy. It looked like you becoming so comfortable in your own skin that their opinions felt like distant weather in a country you'll never visit. And they watched all of this happen, watched you transform without their input, without their advice, without their validation, and it destroyed the illusion they'd built that you needed them, that you were lucky to be in their circle, that they were doing you a favor by keeping you around as the person they could feel superior to whenever their own lives felt empty. But here's where it gets beautiful, where the story takes a turn they never saw coming because they were too busy writing your ending to notice you were just beginning. That 0.1% was your warm-up, your stretching before the race, your sound check before the concert, and they mistook it for your grand finale. They threw parties celebrating your departure, convinced themselves they won, told stories about how they always knew you weren't built for their level, how you couldn't handle the pressure, how you were all potential and no execution. They got comfortable in your absence, redistributed your energy among themselves like vultures picking at what they thought was a carcass, never realizing you weren't dead, you were metamorphosing. And butterflies don't announce their arrival, they just show up one day and make the whole garden look different. So, while they were busy toasting to your failure, you were busy becoming unforgettable, not through revenge, not through proving them wrong, but through the simple, devastating act of becoming so aligned with your truth that their version of you became fiction, became mythology, became a story they tell themselves to sleep better at night, knowing they had you and lost you forever. Imagine, just for a second, just for the sake of watching their faces drain of color, what happens when you stop operating on reserve power and actually plug into your full capacity? When you stop being polite with your presence and start being powerful with your purpose? That 0.1% built a life they envy while you were still healing. Now imagine 1%, imagine 10%, imagine 50%. Imagine the moment you decide that playing small was a courtesy you no longer owe to people who never appreciated your kindness as kindness but mistook it for weakness. Imagine them watching you move through the world with the kind of confidence that doesn't need validation, the kind of success that doesn't need announcement, the kind of peace that doesn't need defense. Imagine them realizing that every narrative they sold about you was just their fear of who you were becoming. Every lie they spread was just a prayer that you'd stay broken. Every smile they gave you was just a mask, hiding the terror that one day you'd remember your power and never look back. The collapse wasn't just their world, it was their identity, their hierarchy, their entire social structure that depended on you playing a role you outgrew the moment you realized. The script was written by people who never wanted you to have a speaking part, let alone the leading role in your own story. They needed you to be the supporting character, the one who makes them look good, the one who absorbs the pain so they can avoid their own, the one who stays stuck so they can feel like they're moving forward. But the moment you stepped into your 0.1%, the moment you stopped accepting crumbs and started baking your own bread, the moment you looked at their table and realized you'd rather eat alone than feast with people who starve your spirit, that's when everything they built on your submission, your silence, your sacrifice, came crashing down like a house of cards in a hurricane they didn't see coming because they were too busy admiring their own reflection to notice the storm gathering behind them. And now they're living in the aftermath of their own arrogance, watching you from a distance they can't close no matter how hard they try, because you're not the same person they knew. You're not even the same species anymore. You evolved past their frequency. You're operating on wavelengths they can't detect, can't disrupt, can't decode. They're sending indirect messages, hoping you'll respond. They're telling mutual friends they miss you, hoping it'll get back to you and soften your resolve. They're posting content clearly aimed at your attention, dropping your favorite songs, mentioning your old haunts, performing nostalgia like it's a magic spell that'll reverse time and bring you back to the version of you they could manage, control, predict. But you're not coming back because you didn't leave them. You left who you had to become to tolerate them. And the person you are now wouldn't even recognize the person who accepted their treatment as normal, their disrespect as friendship, their manipulation as love. Let's talk about what happens next. About the future they're terrified of. The timeline where you're not holding back anymore. Where that 0.1% becomes 1%, 10%, 100%. Where you stop being the best kept secret and start being the loudest truth in every room you enter. They're scared because they know, even if they'll never admit it, that you were the most talented person in their circle and you were operating on fumes. They know you were the most intelligent person in their conversations and you were barely participating. They know you were the most capable person in their network and you weren't even trying. So what happens when you actually try? What happens when you stop dimming your light? What happens when you stop making yourself smaller to make them comfortable? What happens when you walk into your full power, your complete potential, your absolute truth? The answer is simple and devastating. They become irrelevant, not because you made them irrelevant, but because they made themselves irrelevant the moment they chose to tear down someone who could have built with them, the moment they chose competition over collaboration, the moment they chose ego over evolution. That 0.1% was your mercy, your grace period, your silent prayer that they'd wake up and realize what they had before it was too late. But they didn't wake up, they doubled down. They got louder, they got meaner, they got more desperate in their attempts to prove you were the problem, when really, you were the solution. They were too blind to recognize. And now that you're healing, now that you're growing, now that you're glowing, they're scrambling to rewrite history, trying to take credit for your transformation like they were the catalyst, when really they were just the obstacle, the weight you had to learn to lift, the lesson you had to learn. So you'd never accept that treatment again from anyone, ever, period, end of story. They want to be footnotes in your success story, but really they're just the rough draft you had to write before you learned your voice, the practice round before the real game, the tutorial level before you entered the actual arena where real players compete. Here's the thing about revealing 0.1% of your power and watching their whole world collapse. It teaches you something critical about energy, about presence, about the absolute truth that you don't need to announce your arrival. You just need to arrive. You don't need to prove you've changed. You just need to embody the change. You don't need to explain why you're different. You just need to be so different that explanation becomes irrelevant. They collapsed because they built their confidence on the belief that you'd always be below them, that you'd always need them, that you'd always come back, no matter how badly they treated you. And when that belief shattered, when that foundation cracked, when that narrative died, everything they constructed on top of it came tumbling down. Not because you destroyed it, but because it was never real to begin with. It was just an illusion they maintained. As long as you participated in the delusion, as long as you played the role, as long as you accepted the script. But you stopped accepting, you stopped participating, you stopped playing, and suddenly the whole production shut down because you were the only one bringing real energy, real talent, real substance to a stage full of people playing dress-up with borrowed confidence and rented personalities. And now they're auditioning for new victims, new people to make feel small so they can feel big, new empaths to drain so they can feel full, new spirits to break so they can feel whole. But it won't work the same way it worked with you, because you were special, you were rare, you were the kind of person they'll spend the rest of their lives trying to replace and failing. because you weren't just a person in their life. You were a moment in their existence when they touched something real, something pure, something powerful, and they were too immature, too insecure, too invested in their own illusions to recognize the treasure they were holding until it slipped through their fingers and transformed into something they can see but never touch again. Now let's talk about the future, your future, the timeline, where you're not concerned with their collapse because you're too busy building your kingdom, where you're not thinking about their regrets because you're too focused on your purpose, where you're not wondering if they've changed because you've changed so much that their evolution or lack thereof has zero impact on your trajectory. Imagine waking up every single day and not thinking about them once, not as revenge, not as avoidance, but as genuine indifference, as natural as not thinking about strangers on the street, as automatic as breathing. Imagine reaching a level of success where their names come up in conversation and you pause for a second trying to remember who they are, where their faces blur together with all the other background characters who played small roles in chapters you barely remember. Imagine becoming so aligned with your purpose, so locked into your vision, so committed to your growth that their opinions, their judgments, their narratives about you feel like ancient history, like gossip from a past life, like noise from a frequency you've evolved beyond. That 0.1% showed them who you were on your worst days, during your darkest seasons, in your most limited state. Now imagine who you're becoming on your best days, during your brightest chapters, in your most expanded form. Imagine them watching from the sidelines as you achieve everything they said you couldn't, as you become everything they said you'd never be, as you create everything they said was impossible, not because you're trying to prove them wrong, but because you stopped letting their limited vision of you define your unlimited potential. Imagine them watching you love yourself the way they never could, watching you choose yourself the way they never did, watching you celebrate yourself the way they never would, and realizing that their rejection wasn't your loss. It was your liberation. It wasn't your ending. It was your beginning. It wasn't your failure. It was your freedom. The collapse they experienced when you revealed 0.1% of your power wasn't just about you getting better. It was about them realizing how much better you always were and how blind they were to see it. How much energy you were suppressing to make them comfortable. How much light you were dimming to make them feel bright. How much power you were restraining to make them feel powerful. And now that you've stopped suppressing, stopped dimming, stopped restraining, they're living in a world where your absence is louder than your presence ever was, where your silence speaks volumes, where your indifference cuts deeper than any words ever could. They're haunted by the ghost of what could have been, if they'd chosen to celebrate you instead of competing with you, if they'd chosen to elevate you instead of diminishing you, if they'd chosen to love you instead of using you as a stepping stone for their own broken egos. But here's the beautiful part, the part they'll never understand because they're still playing small, still thinking small, still living small. You didn't reveal 0.1% of your power to destroy them. You revealed it to save yourself, to remember yourself, to reclaim yourself from the prison of other people's expectations, projections, and limitations. Their collapse was just a side effect of your resurrection, a natural consequence of your transformation, an inevitable result of your evolution. You weren't trying to make them fall. You were trying to make yourself rise. And the moment you started rising, everyone who was standing on your shoulders trying to reach heights they couldn't climb on their own, they fell. Not because you pushed them, but because you simply stopped being their ladder, stopped being their stepping stone, stopped being their foundation while they treated you like pavement. And now they're on the ground looking up at you soaring, wondering how you got wings, wondering when you learned to fly, wondering why you're not coming back down to their level. Never realizing that you were always capable of flight. You were just convinced by people who couldn't leave the ground that walking was your limit, that crawling was your destiny, that staying small was your story. But you rewrote the story, you changed the ending, you became the author, the protagonist, the hero, and the victory all at once. And they're just characters in your origin story, the obstacles you overcame. The villains you defeated not with violence, not with vengeance, but with the simple, devastating act of becoming yourself fully, completely, unapologetically. Imagine going to 1% of your power, just 1%, and watching entire networks crumble, watching old alliances disintegrate, watching people who swore they'd never speak to each other bonding over their shared confusion about how you became untouchable, unreachable, unstoppable. Imagine going to 10% and watching industries shift, watching standards elevate, watching people you've never met cite you as their inspiration without knowing your name, watching your influence ripple through communities you've never entered, because your energy is so magnetic, so authentic, so pure, that it transcends physical proximity and touches souls through screens, through stories, through the subtle shifts in consciousness that happen when someone witnesses real power moving with real purpose. Imagine going to 50% and watching the world reshape itself around your vision, watching opportunities chase you instead of you chasing opportunities, watching people who once ignored you now study your every move, analyze your every word, trying to decode the formula, bottle the magic, replicate the success, never understanding that there is no formula, there is no magic. There is just you finally deciding to stop playing small in a world that needed you to stay small.